Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Robinson, and today we're going to talk about subject-verb agreement. Now, the idea of agreement when you're talking about subjects and verbs instead of people may sound confusing, but once we do a quick review of what subjects and verbs are, then we can define agreement, look at some example sentences, and the idea should be much clearer. So let's start with looking at subjects. Remember, you may have learned this from elementary school, you may have learned this in middle school, but a subject is nothing more than who or what is the main actor in a sentence, who or what is doing something. So in our first example sentence here, it says Jenny is in a good mood. So the subject is Jenny because she is the person that the sentence is about, and she is in a good mood. So that is what she is doing. This is also known as the predicate, but we don't have to get that technical. Now, I think in primary school, some of you may have learned that the subject was the first word of the sentence, or it was really easy with really simple sentences to say it's always the first word. That is a misconception. The subject can be toward the beginning of a sentence, but it's not always the very first word. So in this second example, it says, Yesterday, the artists asked Jenny to pose for a portrait. Well, now I think we know why Jenny is in a good mood because she's been asked to pose for a portrait. But her posing for the portrait is not the main concern of the sentence. If you take a look at it, it says, Yesterday, the artists asked her to pose for that portrait. So the way this sentence is constructed, the artists are the subject of this sentence, and what they did was ask her to pose for the portrait. So that is how we take a look at your basic level subjects, and it can also get a little more intense when we look at compound subjects. So, again, same deal. Subject just tells us who or what is doing something. But in this example, we have a much more detailed subject. So it says the irritated iguana and the grumpy giraffe argued all day. So in this case, you have way more than one or two words that are the subject of your sentence. You've got adjectives, you have multiple subjects, right? The iguana and the giraffe. You might think, well, there's more than one subject here, but because they're joined with that word and, all of that together, all of those words is one subject. Okay. So what did they do? Argued all day. And again, that's called the predicate. And again, even though that's at the beginning of this particular sentence, it could have been rephrased in a way that doesn't necessarily make it so. So let's take a look at verbs. Now, again, it may seem super easy, but let's just make sure that we are understanding that a verb is just what something or someone does. It could also be a state of being, and we'll talk about that in a second. In this first example sentence, it says Layla plays on her school's softball team. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's playing right this minute. It just means that she is on the softball team or that she is a member of the softball team. And these other examples, Tony dances every Tuesday after school, Sarah and Ricky cooked dinner together, and Candace dreams of becoming a doctor, just show that you can have verbs that not only show you what somebody is doing, but when they are doing it. The easiest example to take a look at there is the one where it says Sarah and Ricky cooked dinner together. It doesn't tell us exactly what day they cooked, but we know that it's in the past because that verb is in past tense. So next up, we have some special verbs, and you may remember these. You may have heard people call them helping or linking verbs. Basically, we just need to focus on the words be, have, and do. So these verbs aren't really action packed. They are just helping connect the subject to the rest of the sentence. That way, everything makes sense. So in this case, instead of saying that Alexis plays on her school's softball team, we would just say Alexis is on her school's softball team. To our ear, they sound a little different, but in our mind, those two sentences translate the exact same way. So this chart right here is how you would conjugate these words. So in the left column, we have the word be, and that can be conjugated in different ways. Depending on what your subject is, you might see that as am, is, are, was, were, or will be. And then you also might pick up on the fact that those are in present, past, and future tense going down that list. In the middle column, we have the word have, which you might see as have, has, had, or will have. And finally, in the right column, you have the word do, which could be conjugated as do, does, did, or will do. This would be an excellent time to take a screenshot of that chart and put it in a Google Doc. That way you can have it for your notes later, or you can just pause this recording and write this chart down. Okay, so now that we have reviewed subjects and verbs, it would be a really good time to actually define what we mean when we say subject-verb agreement. So when we say agreement in English class, this is a big idea. All that means is that subjects and verbs should match or agree with each other when we're talking about number. Now, you might think this is English class and we shouldn't bring numbers into it, but you've heard of the ideas singular and plural when it comes to nouns or subjects. Well, we also have singular and plural verbs. And basically, if you have a singular subject, you should have a singular verb to go with it. And if you have a plural subject, you should have a plural verb to go with it. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like. So with a simple subject, this is actually really easy. All you have to do is follow this rule to match singular subjects with singular verbs or plural subjects with plural verbs. So in this sentence here, it says Jenny's friend is in a good mood. So our subject is Jenny's friend. And when you're trying to figure out what is the number, is it singular or plural? Well, singular comes from single for the word one, and plural just means two or more than one. So we're counting here, and in this sentence, how many friends does Jenny have? It's just one. Now, for her sake, I'll hope that Jenny has more than one friend, but in this sentence, we're only hearing about one. So in this case, we would say Jenny's friend, and we would match that with the singular verb is. Now, that's the technical reason, but if you want kind of a more instinctive reason, if you wanted to rewrite this and try to use a different verb there, your only other option would be the verb are. So think about it. Would we say Jenny's friend are in a good mood? Not really. It sounds off to our ear because it doesn't make that singular match. So make sure that, again, you follow this key rule: singular subject, singular verb, plural subject, plural verb. Now let's take a look at some more agreement examples. In this one, if we're combining two subjects using the word and. Now, we just looked at this and we called it a compound subject, but let's just say we're using two different nouns or two different objects, and we are trying to combine them and trying to figure out, well, what verb should I use? So let's look at this example sentence. It says, Dave and his best friend are entering the trumpet contest. Now, our rule says when you're combining two subjects with the word and, you use a plural verb. It doesn't say you sometimes do that. It says just use that. So we have Dave and we have his best friend. So because they're connected with the word and, we will use the plural verb are. So let's look at another situation where we would talk about subject-verb agreement when we use the words doesn't and don't. So doesn't is just a contraction that means does not. And since the word does is a singular verb, it would go with a singular subject. And the word don't is a contraction for do not. And since do is a plural verb, it goes with a plural subject. That might be a little bit lengthy of a rule for you, but your ear will pick up on the pattern that sounds the best. So let's take a look at this example sentence. If Dave doesn't like the idea, he'll never go along with it. Now, if you are around your friends, it's possible that you might hear them say, well, if Dave don't like that, or if he don't like that. But in this case, we want to make sure that we're speaking formally. Remember that No Red Ink is going over grammar that is found in standard written formal English, like you'd see in an essay, not informal or slang usage. So this may be one that trips you up, even though the rule is pretty clear, and even though we should know the difference between singular and plural. This is a question that has given quite a few of my students fits. So make sure you pay attention. And we're also going to look at agreement when a sentence is beginning with the words here or there. So if that happens, where the sentence begins with here or there, all you just need to do is take a look at the subject that it coming after that to determine whether the verb is singular or plural. So in this example sentence, it says, there is a delicious slushy in Dave's possession. So the sentence starts with the word there. We have a singular verb, but we really need to look for the noun, a delicious slushy. So if you were confused about, well, it starts with the word there, I don't know whether to put is or are, you would just kind of skip over the verbs for a second and look, well, how many of these nouns do I have? Since there's just one slushy, we would backtrack and say, all right, instead of using the word are, I'll use the verb is. So to review, we have reviewed subjects and verbs. We have defined what it means to be in agreement, and we've taken a look at some examples that you'll see, especially in the earlier parts of our practice. So now's the time to go show what you know in No Red Ink. If you get stuck or you have trouble, don't be afraid to review the lessons there, click the show hint button, or review this video again. If you're still having trouble after that, feel free to reach out to me by email, or you can speak to me in class.